sorry. Okay, technical issues. Okay, so we'll go back there, share. So if we go back here, just a quick introduction really to the ARC education. It was born out of adversity, I guess, from three educators or three teachers that have been disenfranchised due to our choices, and it's now down to two of us, one with COVID. So we're really pushing the envelope when it comes to time and shared work and stuff like that. But we've set up this platform with two directions really. One is so that we can make an income ourselves, and also offer the opportunity for other educators, whether they're teachers or not, to develop their own source of income and their own businesses as well. So empowering them to be able to do that. And we do that by our directories, and which will collate and bring a whole lot of educators once we start developing content together in one place where the general public can come onto the site and find what they need when it whatever they need to that has to do with education. The words aren't coming very clearly, but so that is our monetized side of things. Educators and educational services and businesses pay us a really reasonable subscription to be on our site. It's a bit like the yellow pages for education in New Zealand. The other, probably more exciting and more focused part of the ARC education is building a community where we can support each other in whatever context, and within that community actually having a go at shifting paradigms. All three of us were pretty disillusioned with how things are going in mainstream education at the moment, and we decided that it was high time that people started discussing, and when I say people, I mean the people, not educational professionals and things like that, because what's happened is that, well, we feel what's happened is that education has become almost elitist in the way it operates. The everyday person, and yes, at first it's going to be us educators getting together and discussing this, I realize that, but I'm hoping that we can bring on more and more people who, because everyone has been affected by the education system at some time in their life. It doesn't matter who you are. So, and start bringing up a groundswell and developing new ideas around how we can do things that will really appreciate, it will really create a paradigm that is inclusive, because at the moment it isn't. Oh yeah. Somebody's doing something similar, which is great. We've just seen in the chat there. Hopefully we can get this bring all the groups together actually, and get this going in a really cohesive way. So that's the arc. And I think, Rachel, you've had a look, haven't you? Oh, she's frozen.
Muted. I have had a look. I mean, we've talked offline about this, and I am really quite interested. So just by way of introduction, Mike, I run a fledgling company called Master Dyslexia. I'm a Davis dyslexia facilitator, and became licensed 1 month before the first lockdown. So I've been trying to get things off the ground since then. And most of my work currently is face-to-face, in person. I should say in person, because face-to-face is now also on Zoom, but it's quite tricky to do on Zoom because it's hands-on, working with clay as a medium of learning. It's highly effective, but it's also intensive and therefore costly for families. And there's very little funding out there. I've got a war story to share at some point today about that. So I've been working with another colleague of mine who's based in Cambridge, and we've been adapting a series of webinars and a 6-week online course from the UK called Why Tyrannosaurus But Not If. And it's designed as a support course for parents and tutors who are working with those sort of older children and teens who are struggling with the reading demands and are probably neurodiverse or dyslexic, but we're kind of targeting what we call the bright but struggling learners. And so we ran that webinar series end of last year, and the course in February, and it was really, really successful, and we're about to launch another one in June. And I felt that this platform would be a great way to let people know about it, and to build awareness. We did a webinar for a couple of teachers last night, and we've ended up having to do it in two pieces because they had so many questions. I don't know what it is about the profession, but they just had 100 questions which we could all answer, but it chewed up what we'd planned to do. So we got through half of it. But I said to my colleague afterwards, I said, gosh, there's so much awareness to create amongst teachers about these alternative ways to help some of our more challenged learners outside sort of the mainstream, because all the questions are coming from a mainstream paradigm, and it was interesting just to take them through some exercises and then for them to get, not everyone thinks the same way, and not everyone's brain works the same way as mine, and these are senior, seasoned teachers. And so I see a role also in purely educating educators about neurodiversity in particular, and how there are really great methods out there to help those students. So that's part of what I'm doing, and I love what you're creating, Carly, and I would hope that we can broaden what you're doing here to other groups and the homeschooling community. A lot of parents who approach me about their kids are choosing to homeschool their kids now because they just were shocked at the difficulties their children were having in school.
And actually, it's quite shocking how exclusive the homeschool communities are, especially for these new parents who have decided that they're going to homeschool, especially in the last 6 months or so. The homeschool community is being quite closed off towards them in many ways. So,
wow, what closed off to new parents?
Yeah, I think because they're feeling that they're into homeschooling for political reasons, and they don't want to get involved in that, which may be true, but the fact of the matter is it doesn't matter what the reasons are. The homeschool community has grown exponentially in the last 6 months, And we have a whole group of young people in New Zealand who are obviously not being educated properly according to their whānau, that their needs are not being met, whatever they may be. And it would be best if and that's one of the biggest reasons why we're wanting to do this, is so that people can actually come forward and say, well, actually, in a safe, non-judgmental space, actually, this is why we think schools crap in New Zealand, or this is why we think universities don't work, or and then also we're hoping that through this we can bring forward some different ways of thinking. I mean, we can talk about Davis, we can talk about, and I'll show you some, actually we can go there now, because this obviously is, this was our primary goal, to contribute a shift in paradigms in society and education, creating a practical platform, promoting all forms of educators and education to create that choice. It's the empowerment comes in the choice.
Yes.
And being able to take control of what you want to learn and how you want to learn it. And it would be great if systemically we could create that. So we want to be almost like a microcosm of a model that could be adopted. Obviously it would have to be tweaked and discussed and all that, but maybe we can be an example. Creating an alternative income source for would-be educators and teachers, creating a supportive and challenging environment for thriving community of teachers and learners of all ages and backgrounds. And making a living is we've got to do this. So this is how we wanted to create a paradigm shift, and there might be other ideas as well. We're certainly not locked in, but sharing alternative paradigms, generating new ideas and concepts, gaining a generalized understanding of what the people of Aotearoa want from an education, and collecting and collating data to create a paper or report. So that's basically what the intention is of this. So there were some discussion topics, and I think that's where I was heading when I cut you off. So yes, Rachel, I think, not only teachers, but our parents as well could do with a whole different approach, or being exposed to a whole lot of ideas that they can choose what fits best for their whānau, their kids, themselves.
Yes.
As well, because we've kind of been locked into this one way of thinking around education and school, haven't we? And Mike, I know with your ECE, actually, Mike, would you like to tell Rachel a little bit about on you?
Okay. I'm very interested. I'm sort of following through, thinking as we're talking. But so my background was originally still is in public health actually, but I got involved in education in the early 90s with early childhood education from a public health perspective. But because I'm just basically interested in human development, I then started paying attention to early childhood education in its own right in the mid-90s. And I actually set up the Wellington Regional Public Health Program for early childhood centres. And that was done to completely change the way we approached that. So public health units around the country tended to inspection-based stuff, which I'd already recognised was completely useless. And not only that, but we weren't the regulators. I thought, what are we doing here? And what I saw at that time, Te Whariki came out, and because part of my public health background is working with health promotion, I was looking at this and saying, far out, Te Whariki, this is health promotion on a silver platter. But what you need to be able to do is look at the whole person. Now, of course, in Te Whariki, one of the comments I'd make about Te Whariki is that it is not an educational. Oh, sorry, I should check. Are you familiar at all with Te Whariki? That's the early child education curriculum guidelines.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So yes, they're called curriculum guidelines, but they're not curriculum, and they're not an education, and it's not an educational model. It's a human development model. It's brilliant, and it can be used at any age very well.
Absolutely.
You know, and so what I saw there is that it's an approach to a whole person. And the other thing that I discovered along the way was that I actually took a lot of pleasure in engaging in the creative side of early childhood education. So actually in 2009, I set up what was to be short-lived design business for outdoor areas for early childhood education. It was short-lived because of Anne Tolley's funding cuts in 2010 that just put the sector into a complete panic and destroyed my business because people couldn't afford to do long-term planning, which is what I did. But the whole idea was to work on a concept of imagination worlds where learning is in context. And one of the things I've seen is that there are people who are operating early childhood centres trying to make it look like a classroom for 3-year-olds. And even, I mean, one that was part of my research cohort in 2017, person who thought that they were being a leader in the sector had a centre that was set up with, here's the literacy area, and here's the block area, and here's the painting area. No understanding of how children learn. And it was interesting having conversations with a friend of mine who was a reliever in that centre, and she said, you know, the children were always mixing it up, and this person didn't want them to mix it up. No, this happens over here. But do you not understand that learning is contextual, and all of those components of learning happen around an activity and within an activity? So there was this failure of understanding of basic education. But I'm also a university tutor. So I work 3 days a week for Massey University. I tutor in environmental health, which is not at all what I want to be doing, but it puts bread on the table. The other days of the week, you know, the other 5, I am the executive officer for an organisation called ECE Reform. Now, I was just thinking, Carly, would I be able to do a quick screen share?
Sure, hang on, I'll do the permissions thing. We're getting there. You should be able to now.
Okay. Right.
Can you? Yeah.
Okay, you able to see that one?
Yes.
So yeah, so this is our front end of our website. And so that point, children's quality of life first. Children are not early learners, they're people. And children at the centre of early care and education. And part of where I'm coming from is that people don't live life to learn. So if you took the statement that, you know, I mean, learning is an essential component of our lives in the same way that food is an essential component of our lives, but we don't live to learn any more than we live to eat, even though both may be very enjoyable. And so it's understanding there's more to life than that, and that those 5 years, like for early childhood, those 5 years experientially, because of children's different perception of time, the lived experience, I would say, is probably equal to about 10 to 15 years of midlife. It's a huge hunk of life. And so I'm focusing on, first of all, the person, and then the principle that, you know, happy puppies play.
Yeah.
Happy, healthy children once their world is secure, they're secure in themselves, they're secure in the world around them, then they'll venture out and they'll explore. Then they'll engage with learning. And so you create that safe environment first of all. And I can see all of this understanding rolling out to primary, to secondary, to tertiary education.
Absolutely.
And when I run a half-hour tutorial for my adult students, the first thing that I want to do is to create, or if I'm doing a lecture, when I've done lectures for early childhood teachers, the first thing I want to create is a comfortable environment. The first thing I want is that people are relaxed. Then I want them to be, interested, stimulated, engaged. And then we roll. Because now you've got that active environment for learning. So to me, this is core to education. I'll just stop that share because we don't need that now. So even though my focus is on early childhood education, my scope is thinking scope is right across. And actually my mother, by the way, was a spelled teacher for 20 years. And she would sit at the breakfast bar in her kitchen with her one-on-one student interaction, and she transformed lives. My mum passed away 6 years ago, and the testimonies at her funeral from the kids that she took through. I would have been in prison if it was not for you. And these are the awards I won. And her key approach was to engage with the person to start with. The first session was, what are you interested in? What pushes your buttons? And she would find whatever books she could, whatever resources she could that engaged with that person's interest, and then roll from there. And to me, this is so core. And a lot of this, when we look at something like homeschooling, I don't have children myself, so I would have loved to have homeschooled had I had children. But I have thought about what are the skills that you need to be able to be a successful home educator. So I just have ideas there. And so I thought one of the things that's needed around homeschooling are resources that are neutral in their political, faith-based, or whatever environment. They're just resources for how people learn, how children learn, how to engage children in learning, ways you can go about pulling in resources for learning, for that fantastic opportunity that you have when you're doing it in that environment. And again, part of that is reflecting on my own experience that I did very well through primary and through to mid-secondary school, and then I started to have some trouble. But I learned so little from school. I learned so much from home. And in fact, school was overall damaging to me. I would have done a lot better without it, as long as I had other social engagement. And there were much better things for social engagement than school that would have been available to me. But I got school instead, and that just did me damage. So yeah, so that's a long introduction. Sorry, I didn't mean to take so much time, but
no,
this is why I'm interested in the whole context. So I'll shut up now.
Kia ora, Heather, welcome. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
No worries, no worries. Heather, would you like to quickly do a quick introduction of who you are and why you're here? And then we'll quickly introduce everybody else as well.
Okay. The reason why I'm here is, I'm a teacher, but I'm also a mum and a grandmother, and I basically love working with children. And I know there's something seriously wrong with our education system. I've known it for a long time, but I was forced to face it with the mandates. To be blunt, we're supposed to advocate for our children, and we're supposed to, because I'm early childhood trained as well as primary trained, and the early childhood curriculum is very, very focused on the well-being, emotional, social aspects of, you know, the development of young children. And yet we go and abuse and bully our teachers. How can we stand for our children when we're being bullied ourselves? And, you know, but anyway, I do like the solutions focus. So, you know, for myself, I need to look forward, put the past behind me and go forward, and let's see what we can do to help what's desperately needed. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Heather. So, Mike, just really quickly, who you are.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah.
Because Mike's just finished introducing.
So the very short version is I'm the only public health specialist for early childhood education in New Zealand, have been the only one for 30 years, and or forever. And I'm also the executive officer of the group ECE Reform, organisation ECE Reform, that started March last year, looking to transform what we're doing in the early childhood education sector. So, yeah, that's a quick version. Sorry, I could have given you that before.
And Rachel?
So I'm a Davis dyslexia facilitator based here in Kapiti. My business is Master Dyslexia. Prior to that, I've spent 10 years working in the corrections space and then in the wānanga space with wānanga or Aotearoa as a literacy. Well, I started out in corrections more in a project capacity, but ended up in education and training of mainly incarcerated students, implemented a secure online learning platform, which I found out today is still running, which amazes me because most things go into corrections and then disappear and you never hear from them again. But it's still running. I was talking to a colleague today and he said, when they're about to launch some more education on that platform, which is really exciting that they're doing that still. I worked a lot with youth learners in the space, but also a lot of trades training tutors and how to actually help their learners outside of the normal, you know, rote learning business. So we did a lot with the implementation of, I think, in the adult learning space, the literacy and numeracy progressions and how to teach in a more learner-centric way and accommodate different learning styles. That was kind of the early experience of that. And similar stuff in the wānanga, same type of, you know, often really bright, really capable students and staff who had barriers to their literacy and numeracy. And often I can see now a lot of it will be in the neurodiverse space as well. But back then I knew something wasn't working, but I didn't have the tools. And hence I went and trained as a Davis facilitator. And I can see all those tools very beneficial for all of those types of learners. So I've kind of seen the gritty results of education failure, if you like, in the corrections system in particular. And often not, and this is no slight on the wānanga, but the wānanga do a really good job of picking up second and third chance adult learners who've often, for various reasons, missed out on quality education. And often they say, this is the first time that I felt it's safe for me to learn. And I think that that's, as much as there's challenges in the wānanga space, I have to give them huge kudos for that they make it safe for people at 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 to come back to education in a safe environment where they can express themselves in their wholeness, right? And be respected for that, and that people are willing to try different methods of learning. And you know, the miracle of second language acquisition to all of the wānanga, and not just the one I worked for, is incredible. And we ignore that completely in our mainstream education. So I have a very strong social justice bent, if you like. And I just get really frustrated that we have so many capable young people in our country who are not being equipped to lead lives where they can have the full expression of those capacities and they can thrive not just as a learner, but as a contributing person in our community. And, you know, I don't want to turn this into a political thing, but I just think the times we find ourselves in are searching times for what is the world we really want for our young people, and how do we go about creating that through whatever mahi that we do. And hopefully collaboratively we can start to come together and get some frameworks. I love what you've been outlining, Mike, about early childhood education. It is a very precious time. What do they say? The Romans used to say this, didn't they? Give me the boy for the first 7 years and I'll give you the man. I mean, you're kind of alluding to that too. It's how we look after people in those first 5 to 7 years of their life is, and I can tell you a lot of stories from corrections, you know, and it's not just about education, but education is where we can influence the most, I think.
Absolutely, and that's why, hence this. And I'm hoping that we can bring together as many people as we can. We had Lynette who left the meeting saying that she was already part of a group that's doing this sort of thing. It would be great if we could all just come together as all these separate groups. In some way or another. It doesn't necessarily mean that we only have to have one way of doing it, but it would be good if all the groups met together in some capacity and shared information and views and kōrero. And hopefully that will happen one of these days.
Well, I'm involved with a couple of communities of practice in the adult literacy and neurodiversity space, and perhaps creating, you know, a community of practice more focused on the, you know, this end of the education spectrum might be the answer, so that people can feel they can come from these different groups and we're not in competition. We're actually trying to figure stuff out across the sector.
Absolutely. I think we've been so conditioned into thinking competitively instead of collaboratively. And that's the other thing about the ARC education. I've had so many people say, but you know, there's so many sites that do this and do that. And I said, yeah, we're not in competition with anyone. You know, in fact, they are potential clients. You know, what we're really wanting to do is gather everyone as much as we can and hold space for everyone. That's basically what we're wanting to do. But and that's actually what any education system should do, shouldn't it? Well,
yes,
I'm thinking that's really important. I've just made a few discussion topics here, a list of them. There are so many more, and I'd be really, really happy and grateful that if you could actually, if you've got any ideas, if you could email them to us. I'll put the email in the chat, but or even if you just go onto the website and comment on the event page. I'm also going, what I'm going to do is actually put a page up dedicated to this project as well, so and make that an interactive page. So please feel free to do that. These were just some of the things that, and I say some because you know, when you start thinking about all the ideas and things that you have come across in your professional life, the list could go on forever. But these are some of the ones the main ones that have possibly influenced me in my practice. You know, Sir Ken Robinson's, he's been a hero of mine since the early 2000s. unfortunately, he passed in 2020, which was to me a tragedy. But his kaupapa, his thinking was very much aligned with mine, the whole holistic approach, and that the awe and wonder of the human condition, basically, at how amazing we all are and the capabilities and capacities that we all have. Rudolf Steiner, I'm sure most people have heard of him, but it would be quite good to do a few, do a couple of discussions on Waldorf schooling, and obviously Maria Montessori, and I'm not sure if everybody's heard about Reggio Emilia. Have you, Rachel? No. He's really interesting as well, very interesting man. So that would, and if we can pull all our thoughts and ideas around them and put those out, it would be great. I have a really strong mindfulness practice myself, but also component to my teaching. And actually Davis, although he doesn't say it, it is very much, the tools are based on that whole idea of being in the moment and using your power, so to speak, right here now, with the tools. Just to let Heather and Mike know that I've actually been through the Davis program and I advocate for it, and actually my paper was written on the Davis program and is published on their website, isn't it, Rachel?
Yes.
Much to my surprise, really, being dyslexic myself. So other ideas like play and project-based learning, which play-based learning is basically the precursor to project-based learning, which is I think very much in line with Mike, your ideas as well, about how learning is very much contextual and practical and experiential. So there's just a few things that we could look at, and I'm hoping that, let me see if I can get this, that we could do this, and if anybody's got any other ideas, please let me know. So if we do a fortnightly meeting, a discussion meeting like this, the week previous, I'll send out the discussion topic of the next week, with support materials and readings and videos and whatever, and perhaps a survey question. I'm putting together a survey that will hopefully help me write this report. So one question at a time, we can have a look at it and people can actually say, actually, this question's useless, or this question's really interesting, and these are my thoughts on it. And at the meeting, I'll do a quick summary of the topic, and we can have a discussion, and then discuss practical suggestions on implementations and uses of that idea. But if people think that it's a crap idea and that we shouldn't actually use it at all, that can be discussed too. And so and the last one is whether that question should be part of the whole survey, because what I actually want to do is eventually send out a public survey and gather voice that way too, because obviously this is going to take time to to develop, because today these 4 of us, hopefully the next time there's 6 of us, hopefully the time after that there's more. And what I'm going to do in helping to promote this is that I'm going to put the recording up on the website, but also on Facebook and our social medias, if that's okay with you. Well, it should be, because that's part of our agreement. So, and Heather, I'll send you a copy of this slideshow.
Thank you.
And you can have a look through that. But has anybody got any more comments or anything that I can add to a meeting or the structure of it? And it will grow organically. You know, we need to be, I know that we need to be flexible, and you know, it's not going to be boom, boom, boom. This meeting hasn't been boom, 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 but at least we've got some kind of structure to pin things onto. Yeah. So, any comments?
I think it's got great potential, because, you know, we're all sitting out here in various forms of teeth gnashing. You know, my colleague in Hamilton that's the war story I wanted to share, was she had this beautiful young Pacifica lad wanting to go to music school. He's probably autistic and had not spoken substantially until she met with him. But he's very talented DJ, very talented with music, but speech and written language, obviously, all really inaccessible to him. And she met with him and his family and his the head of the music school where he wants to study. And they put together a plan for how my colleague could assist him to come out of that, if you like, that void of silence and be able to interact with the world. And they put in a detailed funding application that's taken ages to write to MSD, and they just got no yesterday. And you don't fit some of our criteria, but we recommend something else which does not address his neurodiversity. So it's been quite upsetting, I think. Yeah. So now we're all figuring out how we can fundraise so that this young man can get the help he needs, so that he can become a really effective learner in the thing he's really passionate and good at, and contribute in the world, and not have his neurodiversity be a barrier to doing that, you know. So, you know, we've got to find better answers than no.
I completely agree with you there. Having been a SENCO for a few years now, the amount of no's that you get, the door slammed in your face, and well, oh well, you know, I was telling Mike the other day, you get passed on to this agency, that agency, the next agency, and you all invariably end up at the same agency you started out with, who are still saying no. And meanwhile, all these kids are falling off the bus left and right. You know, it is tragic, but we can, you know, if these stories can be included in a report, but also have solutions going forward, then, you know, whatever happens systemically, whether this system continues, although I have my serious doubts on how it can continue as it is at the moment, or whether we have a whole new system come in, or whether there's parallel systems or whatever. Hopefully some of the voice and some of our dreams and aspirations can be put forward and implemented, you know, if not all of them. and more. You know, I don't see why they couldn't. If this system is destabilized, or the monopoly on education is taken away, you know. Yeah. Or like Mike, we were discussing the other day how education is so politicized that actually it's become completely dysfunctional, because it is completely reliant on the powers that be of the day, rather than on developing a humane, happy, content, thriving society.
Yeah.
I've got a thought to toss in there, which is, in terms of how you, first of all, kind of pull things together and then disseminate them. So I think having that process of having discussions every couple of weeks, I think would be very good, to get the core thinking shared around, so that there are core concepts. So if I can parallel it with EC reform, so core concept there is embodied in the quality model that we're proposing.
Yeah.
That is very simple and basically says quality of care, quality of environment, and on that you build your added value for learning and development. But if you don't have those platforms in place, you are not going to get very far. So it's that understanding that there are things that underpin anybody's learning environment, that enable you to then tailor it for the person. Principles like in the proposed early years ministry, that it has an obligation to promote diversity of provision. So what that's doing is getting a government level buy-in to something that gives freedom on the ground, so that the freedom on the ground does not mainstream fringe, but that the diversity is actually core to the concept. In fact, required of the department to promote. So some of those ideas, now obviously we haven't got this thing through yet, but I was interested to get, as I say, in that conversation that I had with Erica Stanford, that she was interested in hearing more. She did not close her door to the idea of a ministry operating like that, but also that ministry is designed to link into communities. And part of my inspiration for the community structure came from work I did a couple of years ago with a Central North Island primary school, where they said we have, shattered community, a lot of gang activity. They said we have 8-year-olds at the developmental level of a 4-year-old. We have children coming to school in nappies. We have children who don't know how to play. That's major trauma. Children don't know how to play. Of course, don't play, don't learn very well. And so what do you do for a community like that? How do you transform communities like that? Big question. Interestingly, I got involved from a conversation from someone who was actually an Airbnb guest of mine. I was doing Airbnb at the time, and we were talking around play-based learning, because primary schools are starting to take on play-based learning. Well, ironically, we've seen a suppression of play-based learning in early childhood, with the fake early learner thing that makes it look like classrooms. So how do you get those fundamental concepts embedded in something that can move as a whole movement together? So anyway, these are the things I'm inspired by what you're doing and tossing the thoughts around. I'll just make one more comment, that is, don't be discouraged by this little group size, because it takes time to get this rolling. 18 months, 15 months down the track, EC reform is starting to sort of get momentum. But I've spoken to a room full of teachers in Christchurch, a room full of teachers in Napier, and 4 teachers in Auckland. Where were they? What happened? Trying to get people to come to things can be really difficult. I know that Susan Bates of Teachers Advocacy Group had the same thing, 8,000 people on a Facebook page. She organises a meeting 5 people turn up or no people turn up. It's
Mm.
actually really hard to get people to come to things
Mm.
because of the overall everyone's suffering.
Mm.
So yeah, I'd say being, as encouragement, it doesn't mean things won't keep moving. And a lot of my work now is being done at the individual organisation leader level rather than trying to go to numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. My whole thinking is those who need to be here will be here, and oh, it keeps telling me my internet connection is unstable. Can you all see me? Hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yes, it's all good.
This is going to take time, isn't it? And I fully understand that. But we'll keep plugging away at it. I'm not going to give up, because I think that's what happens to too many people and too many things. People just go, oh well, this isn't working. My whole thinking is, well, but 4 people today, hopefully 6 next time, and we'll try and keep spreading this, the word. And if I can put this recording up onto the website, then people can start seeing exactly what we're wanting to do and how we're going to do it. So and maybe they'll get interested. So let's cross fingers. And I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about it. So hopefully hopefully there'll be some stickability around this anyway. Indeed.
I'll tell you a little perceptual child thing that you've just triggered me, because it just makes me laugh every time someone says bee in their bonnet. My sister, who's 4 years older than me, when she was I don't know, probably about 8 and I was 4, was going to go to ballet lessons. And when there was something she didn't like it, and I remember my mother saying, oh, she got a bee in her bonnet about something and didn't want to go. Well, as it happened, my sister was allergic to bees. And so I thought, well, of course she didn't want to go. If there was a bee in her bonnet, that would be really freaky. And I just love it, because it's sort of like, every time I think about that, it makes me think of how children think, Sorry, random comment, I couldn't resist it.
Literal thinking, not
totally.
literal thinking.
Yep.
Yeah, indeed. If there's anything else we need to discuss, please bring it up now. Otherwise, I think we can probably do a karakia whakamutunga and go on our merry ways. The only thing that I would like to ask you is, what would you like to discuss next? What topic? Mike, perhaps we could look at your model, I was thinking, and
Yep. Okay.
I'll have a look at it and do a blog post on it, if that's okay, and I'll send it to you and you can have a look at it and approve it.
I think the two to focus on for what we're doing here, whereas I would say for ECE reform, the core model is the quality-based contracting.
Yes.
But that's not the core thing for this discussion. I think the core things, the best things for this discussion are actually the 2 other ones, which is the early years ministry, which brings education into a context of life and community, and the 2 teacher, 8 child model of home-based, which also brings group size down, brings relationship into learning, connects communities. I think those 2 would be the ones worth looking at.
Okay.
And the model in the early years ministry, the model for how that ministry is structured, the broader picture side of the ministry structure that has the community-based side would be a good thing to look at.
Which could actually be applied to the Ministry of Education.
Yes.
Not just, absolutely. Okay, I'll have a good look. Is that okay with you, Rachel and Heather?
Perfect, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. So I want to thank you, all three of you, for coming, and hopefully next time we can invite more people, because that would be really exciting. and also for making this really pleasurable. I was so nervous coming in the meeting, because you never know. You never know what you might encounter, and we don't know what you might encounter later on as well. We'll just do a karakia whakamutinga, and then we can say our goodbyes. So, karakia. Ka whakairia te tapu, kia waitia ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, haumie, huie, tahiki e. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It's been a real pleasure and exciting to actually have a good talk. And if you do know of other groups or hear of other groups and things, please don't hesitate to put them in touch with me, and maybe we can have a kōrero, or if you can spread this far and wide and get people to come on, and they don't have to be teachers or educators. You know, there could just be a homeschooling parent, or just a parent that's concerned, or whatever, where you know, I don't want it to be highbrow or inaccessible. So awesome. And the more ideas we get to more people, especially grassroots, then I think the wider the thinking and kaupapa can be. Yeah. Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Nice to meet you all.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.